The ache in my feet had become white noise 3 hours ago. Now, at the tail end of the dinner rush, I moved through Bellissimo's main dining room on autopilot, my body remembering the choreography even as my mind counted exits. Table 6 needed water. The couple at 9 wanted their check. Don't make eye contact. Don't be memorable. Don't exist. I'd been waitressing here for 6 weeks, and I'd perfected the art of being invisible. The restaurant was everything I wasn't. Elegant, established, permanent. Crystal chandeliers cast amber light over white tablecloths. The scent of garlic and wine and expensive perfume hung in the air like a promise of the life I'd never have. The tips were good enough to keep me fed and mobile. The cash-only policy meant no paper trail. That was all that mattered. Zuri. Marco, the maitre d', appeared at my elbow with that particular expression that meant my night was about to get complicated. Mr. DeSantis needs service in the private dining room, upstairs. My hand stilled on the water pitcher. I thought Angela handles upstairs. Angela left early. You'll take the espresso service. His voice dropped. And Zuri? You didn't see anything. You don't hear anything. Understand? The upstairs. Every server knew about the private dining room with its green velvet doors. The place we were explicitly told to avoid. Where certain guests conducted certain business that had nothing to do with the Saltimbocca or the wine list. Where Matteo DeSantis held court. I'd never met the owner in person, though I'd felt his presence in every corner of this place, the way the kitchen staff moved faster when his office door opened, and the way grown men went quiet when his name was mentioned, the whispered stories, some calling him a monster, others a protector, depending on who owed him what. I understand, I said, because there was no other answer. I prepared the espresso tray with hands that had learned not to shake, even when my heart was racing. 4 cups, sugar, a small plate of biscotti. The silver tray felt heavier than it should as I climbed the curved staircase at the back of the restaurant. Each step took me further from the safety of the crowds below, further from the exits I'd memorized on my first day. The hallway at the top was different from the main floor. Darker. Plush carpets swallowed the sound of my footsteps. The art on the walls shifted from pleasant Italian landscapes to imposing abstracts that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire life. So at the end of the hall, the green velvet door stood slightly ajar, golden light spilling through the gap. Voices drifted toward me, male, tense. And if he thinks he can move product through my territory without paying tribute, Matteo handles it his way. We don't question. I should turn around. I should set the tray down and walk away and tell Marco I suddenly felt sick. But I'd learned over 2 years of running that hesitation got you caught. The only way through was forward, invisible, forgettable. My hand moved on instinct as I approached, the same instinct that had kept me alive for 2 years. Document everything. Keep evidence. Have insurance. I pulled my phone from my apron pocket and quickly snapped a photograph through the gap in the doorway, barely looking at what I'd captured before sliding the phone back into my pocket. Then I nudged the door with my hip, the tray balanced perfectly in my hands. The scene inside the private dining room burned itself into my memory in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The room was intimate, expensive. A single table set for 6, though only one man sat. No, not sat. He was tied to the chair. His face was a map of violence, blood dripping from his nose onto his white shirt. 2 men in dark suits flanked him, their expressions carved from stone. The remains of an interrupted meal covered the table. Pasta gone cold, wine glasses half empty, a white napkin stained red. And standing behind the bound man, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with a neck tattoo visible above his collar, was Matteo DeSantis. His eyes found mine the instant I crossed the threshold. Pale, cold, predatory. They held me in place like a hand around my throat. The tray slipped from my fingers. The crash of porcelain shattering against marble was deafening in the sudden silence. Espresso spread across white tile like oil, sugar scattered like snow. And I stood frozen in the doorway, every survival instinct I'd honed over 2 years of hiding, screaming at me to run. One of the suited men moved toward me, hand going inside his jacket. "Luca." Matteo's voice was surprisingly soft, barely above a whisper, but it stopped the man mid-step. "Let her go." Those pale eyes never left mine. There was something in them, not anger, not even surprise. Assessment, calculation, recognition of prey. My voice came out strangled. "I'm sorry, I didn't—" "Go," he said, still in that quiet voice that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting. "Clean yourself up. We'll talk later." I ran. I made it to the staff bathroom before my legs gave out, locked the door, slid down against it until I was sitting on the cold tile, my server's apron still tied around my waist, my hands shaking so badly I had to press them against my thighs to make them stop. "We'll talk later." I knew what that meant. I'd seen what they did to the man in the chair. I'd walked into something I wasn't supposed to see, and now Matteo DeSantis knew my face. My shift ended at 11. I had 7 hours to figure out how to disappear again. 7 hours to pack the few things I owned and get to the bus station. 7 hours to become someone else in some other city, where nobody knew my name. Except I already knew it was too late. Because when I finally stood up and looked in the mirror, I saw it. The security camera in the corner of the dining room. The one pointed directly at the stairs. The one that had captured my face in perfect detail. And something else. Something worse. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and opened the camera roll. There it was. One single photograph, slightly blurred but unmistakable. Matteo DeSantis standing over a bloodied man, taken through the gap in the doorway before I'd pushed it open. I'd documented the evidence before I even knew what I was walking into. And somewhere in this building, Matteo DeSantis was deciding what to do about the waitress who'd just witnessed a crime. If you're ready to see what happens when a waitress becomes a mafia boss's most dangerous asset, like and subscribe. This story gets darker. I didn't run that night. Not because I was brave, I wasn't. But because I'd learned the hard way that running without a plan only got you caught faster. So I finished my shift, cleaned up the broken espresso cups, smiled at customers, counted my tips with hands that barely shook. And I avoided looking at the staircase that led to the private dining room. At 10:47 p.m., 13 minutes before I could clock out and disappear forever, Marco found me again. "Mr. DeSantis wants to see you, in his office." "Now?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Now." The office was behind the kitchen, down a hallway I'd never been allowed to enter. Marco walked me there in silence, then left me standing outside a heavy wooden door. I could hear nothing from inside. No voices, no movement. I knocked. Barely. "Come in, Zuri." He knew my name. The office was smaller than I'd expected. Elegant but austere. Dark wood furniture, leather chairs, a single painting of the Italian countryside on the wall. Behind a massive desk sat Matteo DeSantis, his jacket removed, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing more tattoos that snaked up his forearms. The violent man from upstairs was gone. In his place sat someone who looked almost ordinary, except for those eyes, still pale, still cold, still watching. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." I sat. My server's apron was still tied around my waist, smelling of kitchen grease and spilled wine. He pushed something across the desk toward me. My phone. My stomach dropped. The screen was lit, open to my camera roll, open to the photograph. "You're smart," Matteo said. his voice still carrying that soft, dangerous quality. But not careful. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I waited for the threat, for the weapon, for the men in suits to appear behind me. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied me with an expression I couldn't read. "Who are you running from, Zuri?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Not what did you see? Not do you understand what happens to people who betray me? Who are you running from? I don't. You've been here 6 weeks. You work every shift available. You take cash tips only. You flinch every time the door opens. You position yourself near exits. He ticked off each observation with clinical precision. You move through this restaurant like you're expecting someone to walk through that door and find you. So I'll ask again, who are you running from? Silence stretched between us. Outside the office, I could hear the kitchen staff cleaning up, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of voices. Normal sounds from a normal world I no longer belonged to. It doesn't matter, I finally said. I'll leave tonight. I won't tell anyone what I saw. I'll delete the photo. You'll never. You think I brought you here to threaten you? Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. Zuri, if I wanted you silent, you'd already be silent. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they clarified something. I was still breathing, still sitting in this chair, still holding my phone, which meant he wanted something else. Then why am I here? Matteo stood and walked to a small bar cart in the corner. He poured amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. Whiskey, probably. The expensive kind that people like him drank while people like me served it. He set 1 glass in front of me. Because 2 years ago, someone I loved was running from a man who thought he owned her, and I didn't help her in time. His voice remained soft, but something beneath it had gone jagged. I recognized you the moment you walked through those doors tonight. Not your face. Your fear. He sat back down, his pale eyes holding mine. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to tell me the truth. Who are you running from, Zuri Thompson? My real name. He knew my real name. How did you? I own this restaurant. I know everyone who works for me. He took a sip of whiskey. I also know that the name on your application isn't the one you were born with. I should lie. I should grab my phone and run. I should do anything except what I did next. But something in his voice, that jagged thing beneath the softness, told me he already knew. That this wasn't an interrogation. It was an offering. A police detective named Marcus Reed, I whispered. My ex-boyfriend. Matteo DeSantis smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Then we have something in common, he said. We both know what it's like to be hunted by men who hide behind badges and authority. He slid my phone back toward me across the desk. Keep the photo if it makes you feel safer. But understand something, Zuri. You're not in danger from me. You never were. I looked down at the phone, at the image of violence and power captured in pixels. What do you want from me? Nothing. Tonight. He finished his whiskey and stood. But tomorrow, you're going to come back to work. You're going to move to the day shift, where I can keep an eye on you. And we're going to have a longer conversation about Detective Marcus Reed. Why would you help me? Because I couldn't help my sister. The words came out flat, final. And because I recognize what you tried to do tonight, you saw something dangerous, and instead of running blind, you documented it. Created insurance. That's not fear-talking. That's survival instinct. He walked to the door and opened it. A clear dismissal. Go home, Zuri. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll talk about how to make sure Marcus Reed never finds you. I stood on shaking legs, clutching my phone. At the doorway, I turned back. That man upstairs, the one tied to the chair. What happened to him? Matteo's expression didn't change. He betrayed people who trusted him, so he's learning what that costs. And what does it cost to accept help from you? Now he smiled again. That same dangerous smile. I suppose we'll both find out. I walked out of Bellissimo at 11:03 p.m. into the cool night air. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. The photograph still saved in my camera roll. Evidence, insurance, a loaded gun with no safety. For 2 years, I'd survived by staying invisible, by trusting no one, by running the moment I felt unsafe. But Matteo DeSantis had seen through all of it in a single glance, had recognized the fear I'd hidden so carefully. And instead of using that fear against me, he'd offered me something I'd thought was impossible. Protection. From the most dangerous man in the city. I should keep running. I should be on a bus by morning. But I thought about Marcus's smile, about the way he'd found me before, about how long I could keep running before my luck ran out. And I thought about Matteo's sister, who ran and wasn't fast enough. Maybe invisibility wasn't the answer. Maybe the only way to be truly free was to stand next to someone powerful enough to make the hunters afraid. I looked back at the restaurant, at the amber light glowing through the windows, at the world I'd accidentally stepped into when I'd pushed through those green velvet doors. Tomorrow, I would walk back through that door, not as someone running, as someone making a choice, even if that choice terrified me more than anything I'd run from before. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in my studio apartment, the pipes groaning, footsteps in the hallway above, a car door slamming outside, sent my pulse racing. At 5 a.m., I gave up and made coffee with shaking hands, watching the photograph on my phone screen until the pixels blurred. By the time my day shift started at 11, I'd convinced myself that last night had been some kind of fever dream. Then Marco met me at the employee entrance with an expression that said otherwise. "Mr. DeSantis wants to see you. Now, before you clock in." The walk to his office felt longer in daylight. The kitchen staff moved around me like water around a stone, their eyes sliding past without acknowledgement. Everyone knew when someone was summoned. Everyone knew what it meant. The door was already open. Matteo sat behind his desk in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading something on his laptop. He didn't look up immediately, and I stood in the doorway like a student called to the principal's office, so my server apron folded over my arm. "Close the door, Zuri. Sit." I obeyed, lowering myself into the leather chair across from him. The painting of the Italian countryside on the wall behind him showed rolling hills and a stone villa, peaceful and permanent, in a way I'd never be. The office smelled like expensive cologne and espresso. He closed the laptop and slid my phone across the polished wood toward me. The screen was lit, open to my camera roll, open to the photograph I'd taken through the gap in those velvet doors. My mouth went dry. "You're smart," Matteo said, his voice carrying that same soft quality from last night. "But not careful." I waited for the threat, for his hand to move toward a drawer, for the door to open behind me and reveal the men in suits. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied me with those pale, unreadable eyes. "Who are you running from?" The question landed like a punch. Not "what did you see?" Not "do you understand what happens to people who cross me?" Who are you running from? "I don't know what you've worked here 6 weeks. You take every shift offered. Cash only. No direct deposit, no paper trail." He ticked off each observation with clinical precision. "You flinch when the door opens during rush hour. You always position yourself near the kitchen exit. Last Tuesday, a man in a police uniform came in for lunch, sat in someone else's section, and you hid in the walk-in freezer until he left. Heat flooded my face. I'd thought no one noticed. You move through this restaurant like you're expecting someone to walk through that door and destroy everything you've built here." Matteo's voice remained soft, but something beneath it had gone sharp. "So I'll ask you again. and I need you to tell me the truth. Who are you running from, Zuri Thompson?" My real name. He knew my real name. The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear the lunch prep beginning, the rhythmic chop of knives, the clatter of pans, the murmur of Spanish and Italian mixing in the kitchen. Normal sounds from a world I no longer belonged to. "It doesn't matter," I finally whispered. "I'll leave today. I'll delete the photo. You'll never—" "Do you think I brought you here to threaten you?" Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. "If I wanted you silent, you'd already be silent." The words should have terrified me. Instead, they clarified everything. I was still breathing, still sitting in this chair, still holding my phone, which meant he wanted something else. "Then why am I here?" Matteo stood and walked to the bar cart in the corner. He poured whiskey into 2 crystal glasses, set one in front of me, and returned to his seat with the other. "Because 2 years ago, someone I loved was running from a man who thought he owned her." His voice remained steady, but something beneath it fractured. "And I didn't help her in time. I recognized you the moment you walked into this restaurant, Zuri. Not your face, your fear." He took a slow sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving mine. "So tell me, who is he?" My throat closed. I looked at the whiskey glass, at the amber liquid catching the light, and thought about all the times I'd lied to survive, all the fake names and fabricated stories. But Matteo DeSantis already knew the truth, and he was just waiting for me to admit it. "Marcus Reed," I whispered. "Detective Marcus Reed, my ex-boyfriend." Something dark and satisfied crossed Matteo's face. "Then we have work to do." Matteo made a single phone call after I left his office, and by that evening, my entire life was spread across his desk in a manila folder that shouldn't have existed. I only knew because he summoned me again after the dinner rush, when the restaurant had quieted and most of the staff had gone home. This time, I didn't hesitate at the door. He was standing by the window when I entered, hands in his pockets, looking out at the street below. The folder sat closed on his desk like a loaded weapon. "Sit." I sat. My legs ached from a double shift, but I kept my spine straight, hands folded in my lap. Matteo turned and picked up the folder. I'm flipping it open as he leaned against the edge of his desk. His expression was unreadable in the dim light. "Zuri Thompson doesn't exist," he said quietly. "No credit cards, no social media footprint, no bank accounts. The social security number on your application belongs to a woman who died in Ohio 3 years ago." He looked up at me. "You're a ghost." I said nothing. What could I say? But ghosts leave traces, and my people are very good at finding them. He pulled out a photograph and set it on the desk facing me. A younger version of myself smiled back, arm around a man in a police uniform. Marcus. Before everything went wrong. Sierra Martin, born in Atlanta, moved to Chicago for college, dropped out after 2 years, started dating Detective Marcus Reed 6 months later. My hands clenched in my lap. Reed is decorated, 38 years old, 12 years on the force, reputation for closing difficult cases, though his methods raise questions among his colleagues. Matteo's voice remained clinical, but I caught the edge beneath it. 3 complaints filed by suspects claiming coercion, all dismissed. 2 restraining orders filed by ex-girlfriends before you, both mysteriously dropped. He pulled out another document, this one partially redacted. Internal Affairs opened an investigation 18 months ago after a woman showed up at the precinct with a broken wrist and photographs of bruises. The case was sealed after she recanted her statement and left the state. His pale eyes found mine. That woman was you. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You had no right. I had every right. His voice hardened. You walked into my business. You saw something that could destroy me. You think I wouldn't find out everything about who you are and what you're running from?" The silence between us stretched taut. Then Matteo set down the folder and crossed to the bar cart. He poured 2 whiskeys, drank his in one swallow, and stared at the empty glass. "Her name was Julia," he said quietly. "My sister. She married a lawyer, respectable family, good reputation. Nobody knew what he did to her behind closed doors." His knuckles went white around the glass. "By the time she called me for help, it was too late. He put her in the hospital. She died 3 days later from internal bleeding." My breath caught. "I got there too late, Zuri. I was in New York handling business, and I told her to wait. That I'd come get her when I got back." He set down the glass with careful control. "She didn't wait. She tried to leave on her own, and he killed her for it." He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw past the cold calculation to the wound beneath. "So when I see a woman moving through my restaurant like she's waiting for the axe to fall, when I recognize that particular kind of fear," his jaw tightened, "I won't let it happen again." Matteo picked up my phone from his desk and held it out to me. "The photograph is deleted. All copies. You don't need insurance from me, Zuri. You need something better." I took the phone with trembling hands. "What?" "A real identity, a safe place to live, and someone who knows how to deal with men like Marcus Reed." He met my eyes. "Starting tomorrow, you work day shifts only, and someone will always be here. You'll move into an apartment I own by the end of the week, secure building, doorman, cameras, and you'll stay visible." "Visible? Ghosts are easy to hunt, but someone under my protection?" A cold smile crossed his face. "That's a different conversation. I should refuse. I should walk away from this man and his dangerous world." But I thought about Marcus's smile, about the sealed internal affairs file, about running until my luck ran out. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Matteo said. "Yet." 3 weeks passed like a held breath. I moved into the apartment Matteo provided. 6th floor, corner unit, with locks that actually worked, and windows that didn't face fire escapes. I worked day shifts, and learned to sleep without jumping at every sound. I almost convinced myself I was safe. Then Marcus walked through the door during Tuesday lunch service. I was refilling water glasses at table 4 when I felt it. That animal awareness of being watched. My hand stilled on the pitcher. I looked up and saw him sitting in my section, booth by the window, his police badge clipped to his belt where everyone could see it. The smile he gave me was the same one from 2 years ago. Charming, almost apologetic, like he hadn't put his fist through my bedroom wall the last time I'd seen him. "Hey, baby," he said, when I finally forced myself to approach his table. "Thought you could hide?" My voice came out steady through sheer force of will. "What can I get you?" "Carbonara. And let's skip the act, Sierra." He leaned back in the booth, entirely relaxed, his service weapon visible under his jacket. "You've been hard to find. New name, new city, cash-only lifestyle. Very impressive." I gripped my order pad so hard the pen left indents. Around us, the lunch crowd continued their conversations, oblivious. A businessman laughed at the next table. Someone's phone rang. "I go by Zuri now." "Sure you do." Marcus's smile widened. "Cute place you're working at. Upscale. I did some research on the owner. Matteo DeSantis. Interesting guy. Family connections in all the wrong places." He paused. "Does he know you're a liar, Zuri? Does he know you made up those allegations against me? That you're the reason I spent 6 months under investigation?" My throat closed. "I'll get your carbonara." His hand shot out and caught my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise. Marcus had learned to be careful in public, but firm enough to stop me. "We're not done talking." "Yes, you are." The voice came from behind me, quiet and cold. Matteo appeared beside our booth like a shadow gaining substance, his pale eyes fixed on where Marcus's fingers wrapped around my wrist. Marcus released me immediately and stood, his badge glinting. The two men faced each other across 3 feet of expensive Italian tile, and I felt the temperature in the room drop. "I'm Detective Reed," Marcus said, extending his hand with practiced professionalism. "Just having a conversation with an old friend." Matteo didn't take the offered hand. "This is my restaurant, Detective, and that's my employee. Your conversation is finished." "Your employee?" Marcus's eyes flicked between us, calculating. "Interesting. Does the health department know about your business practices here, Mr. DeSantis? Does internal affairs know about yours?" The words landed like a slap. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his smile stayed fixed. "I don't know what Sierra's been telling you." "Zuri," Matteo corrected quietly. "Her name is Zuri. And she hasn't told me anything I didn't already know, Detective Reed. Decorated officer. 12 years on the force. 2 dismissed restraining orders. 1 sealed investigation." He paused. "Should I continue?" The silence stretched taut. Other diners were starting to notice, conversations faltering as they sensed the tension crackling between the 2 men. Marcus reached for his wallet and threw 2 20s on the table. "Keep the change, baby." His eyes found mine, and I saw the promise there. "I'll see you around." He walked toward the door. Matteo stepped aside to let him pass, but followed him through the exit. I stood frozen by the booth, my hands shaking, watching through the window as the 2 men faced each other on the sidewalk outside. Marcus said something. Matteo replied, his expression carved from stone. Then Marcus laughed. Actually, laughed, and walked away down the street. Matteo stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, watching until Marcus disappeared around the corner. When he came back inside, his eyes found mine across the dining room. "My office," he said quietly. "Now." Marcus returned at 10 o'clock that night, after the last customer had left and the kitchen staff had gone home. I watched from Matteo's office as he walked through the empty dining room like he owned it, his badge still visible, his expression confident. Matteo had told me to stay, to watch, to understand what happened next. "Detective Reed." Matteo rose from behind the bar where he'd been waiting, 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of grappa arranged on the polished wood. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. Didn't realize I had a choice." Marcus slid onto a bar stool, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "Your guy was very insistent." Luca can be persuasive. Matteo poured grappa into both glasses with careful precision. "But this conversation benefits us both, a chance to clarify our respective positions." Marcus lifted his glass but didn't drink. "Let me clarify mine first. Zuri, is a disturbed woman with a history of making false accusations. I came here to check on her welfare, and your behavior suggests you might be enabling her delusions." Interesting perspective. Matteo took a slow sip. Let me offer mine. Detective Marcus Reed, 38, divorced, decorated officer with a talent for closing difficult cases. Also, 3 complaints of coercion dismissed by sympathetic supervisors. Bribes accepted from the Moretti family in exchange for evidence tampering in a weapons case. 2 restraining orders filed by ex-girlfriends, Vanessa Chen and Rebecca Torres. Both mysteriously dropped after you visited them at their homes. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white around the glass. "You've been busy." "I'm thorough." Matteo refilled his own glass. "Should I continue?" "The internal affairs investigation that went nowhere because the witness, Zuri, recanted after you showed up at her sister's house in Atlanta. The 3 other women who've filed reports against you over the past 8 years, all of whom suddenly moved out of state. You're making accusations you can't prove. I don't need to prove anything, Detective. I'm not a cop." Matteo's voice remained soft, almost conversational. "You're not a cop either. You're a coward with a badge who hurts women because you know the system protects you." Marcus set down his glass with deliberate control. "Careful, DeSantis. You might run this neighborhood. But I have friends who'd love an excuse to investigate your operations. The private dining room upstairs, for instance. The shipments that come through your loading dock at 3 in the morning. The cash that never makes it to your tax returns." "You mean these shipments?" Matteo pulled out his phone and turned it to show Marcus the screen. "Time-stamped photographs of you accepting envelopes from Vincent Moretti. Bank records showing deposits that don't match your salary. Text messages discussing evidence disposal." The color drained from Marcus's face. "I've already sent copies to 3 separate journalists and 1 particularly ambitious prosecutor who's been looking for a corruption case to build her career on." Matteo pocketed his phone. "They're in sealed envelopes with instructions to open them if anything happens to me or Zuri. Insurance, you might call it." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Matteo leaned forward, his pale eyes cold. "Here's what's going to happen, Detective. You're going to leave this city. Tonight. You'll request a transfer to another state. I don't care where, as long as it's at least 1,000 miles from here. You'll never contact Zuri again. You'll never speak her name again. And if I refuse, then those envelopes get opened. Your career ends. Your pension disappears. And then," Matteo's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "my people will ensure you understand what it feels like to be hunted by someone who doesn't wear a badge." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You think you can threaten a police officer?" "I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a choice." Matteo remained seated, utterly calm. "Leave with your life intact, or stay and lose everything, including the parts of you that make you feel powerful." The 2 men stared at each other across the bar. Finally, Marcus threw back the grappa in one burning swallow. "You'll regret this." "No," Matteo said quietly. "I won't." Marcus walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back toward the office where I stood watching from the shadows. "Tell Sierra she's traded one monster for another." Matteo's expression didn't change. "Leave, Detective, before I change the terms of our agreement." The door closed behind Marcus with a soft click. The restaurant fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen. Matteo came to the office doorway, his face unreadable. "He'll leave," he said. "By morning, he'll be gone." I should have felt relief, victory, safety. Instead, I felt the weight of what I'd just witnessed, the calculated precision with which Matteo DeSantis had dismantled a man's life in under 15 minutes. "What if he doesn't?" I whispered. Matteo's smile was cold and certain. "Then he'll wish he had." Marcus was gone within 48 hours. So Matteo's people confirmed he'd requested an emergency transfer to Phoenix and boarded a plane before the weekend. Just like that, the man who'd hunted me for 2 years vanished like smoke. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt untethered. Matteo summoned me to his office on a quiet Monday afternoon when the restaurant was closed for a private event upstairs. He was standing by the window again, hands in his pockets, watching the street below like he was waiting for something that would never arrive. "Sit, Zuri." I sat. The familiar leather chair, the painting of Italian countryside, the scent of his cologne and espresso. This room had become strange comfort over the past month, a place where brutal truths were spoken softly. "Marcus Reed is gone," Matteo said without turning. "He won't come back. My people will monitor him. But he's smart enough to know what happens if he returns. Thank you." The words felt inadequate for what he'd done. "Don't thank me yet." He finally turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "Because now we need to discuss what happens next." My stomach tightened. I'd known this moment was coming. the bill for services rendered, the price for protection. Mateo crossed to his desk and pulled out a folder. Not the manila one from before, but something thicker, official-looking. I'm offering you a position, personal assistant. You'd work directly for me, handling both the legitimate business. He gestured vaguely toward the restaurant, and the other operations. Scheduling, communications, record-keeping. You'd see everything. Know everything. He slid the folder toward me. Inside was a passport, a driver's license, and a social security card, all bearing my face, all reading Zuri Thompson in official government ink. A real identity, legal, verifiable. You'd move into a better apartment in a secured building downtown. 24-hour security, cameras, doorman who works for me. You'd have a salary, substantial, and protection. I stared at the documents, my new life printed on government paper. You'd be trading one cage for another, I said quietly. Perhaps. Mateo leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Or you'd be choosing which cage to live in. There's power in that choice, Zuri. Why? I looked up at him. Why would you do this? You don't know me. I'm just a waitress who saw something she shouldn't have. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he moved to the bar cart and poured a single glass of whiskey, drinking it in one swallow before he spoke. Her name was Julia, my baby sister. His voice went rough around the edges. She called me 5 years ago, terrified, begging me to come get her. Her husband, respectable lawyer, good family, had put her in the hospital before. This time, she knew he'd kill her. He set down the glass with careful control. I was in New York, business that couldn't wait, or so I told myself. I said I'd come get her in 2 days, that she should stay with friends until then. His knuckles went white. She didn't wait. She tried to pack her things and leave. He came home early and found her. The silence in the office felt suffocating. By the time I got there, she was in a coma, internal bleeding. She died 3 days later without waking up. Mateo finally looked at me, and I saw the wound beneath his carefully controlled exterior. I failed her because I didn't act fast enough, because I thought I had time. He pushed the folder closer to me. When you walked into this restaurant, I saw Julia. The way you moved, always watching the exits. The way you flinched at sudden sounds. The fear you thought you were hiding. His voice dropped. I won't fail twice, Zuri. I can't. This isn't about saving me, I said quietly. It's about saving her. Does it matter? He met my eyes. You need protection. I need to not feel like a coward who let his sister die. We can help each other. I looked down at the passport, at my face beside a name I'd chosen in a bus station 2 years ago, now made real. I wanted freedom, I whispered. See, not another man controlling my life. Then don't let me control it. Mateo's voice was steady. Work for me. Learn the business. Make your own choices. I'm not asking you to trust me, Zuri. I'm asking you to let me do what I should have done before. I touched the edge of the passport, feeling the weight of the decision. What if I say no? Then you say no. The apartment is yours regardless. The identity is yours. You can walk away from all of this. He paused. But you won't be safe. Not really. Men like Marcus don't stay gone forever. He was right. I knew he was right. When do I start? I started the following Monday, and within a week I understood why Mateo had offered me the position. He didn't need an assistant. He needed someone who could see patterns, who understood survival, who knew when to speak and when to stay silent. The legitimate business was straightforward. Reservations, vendor contracts, payroll for the restaurant staff. But the other business, the one conducted in the private dining room upstairs and in hushed phone calls at midnight, that required a different kind of intelligence. Luca was the first to accept me. Matteo's enforcer stood 6'4", with shoulders that barely fit through doorways, but he had kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Boss says you're smart," he told me on my third day, setting an espresso on my new desk outside Matteo's office. "Says you think like we do. That's rare." Nico Bianchi was different. Matteo's consigliere watched me with calculating gray eyes during our first meeting, on his tailored suit and slicked back hair giving him the appearance of a banker rather than a criminal. "Personal assistant," he said, the title sounding like an insult. "Interesting choice, Matteo. Mixing business with charity." "Zuri handles what I need handled," Matteo replied coolly. "That's all you need to know." But I caught the resentment in Nico's expression, the way his jaw tightened when Matteo asked for my opinion during meetings. He'd been Matteo's right hand for 8 years, and now I sat in the office that connected directly to Matteo's, privy to conversations Nico wasn't invited to. Jasmine remained my anchor to the normal world. My former roommate still worked dinner shifts at Bellissimo, and we met for coffee on Tuesday mornings when the restaurant was quiet. "Girl, you've moved up," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. "From waitress to running the whole operation in 2 months. That's wild. I'm not running anything. I'm just, please, everyone sees how he looks at you, how he listens when you talk." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Just be careful, Zuri. These men, this world, it's not what it looks like from the outside." But I was already inside, learning the language of shipments and territories, of debts owed and favors granted. I sat in meetings where Matteo negotiated with stone-faced men in expensive suits, his voice never rising above conversational level, even as he dismantled their arguments with surgical precision. I watched him command absolute loyalty from his crew, not through fear, though there was plenty of that, but through the certainty that Matteo de Santis protected what was his. The late nights became routine. From after the restaurant closed and the crew dispersed, Matteo and I would remain in his office, reviewing the day's business over whiskey I'd learned to appreciate. It was during these quiet hours that the careful walls between us began to crack. "You're good at this," he said one night, reviewing a contract I'd flagged for inconsistencies. "Better than my last 3 assistants combined." "Survival skills translate." I closed my laptop. "You learn to read people when your life depends on it." "Is that what you see when you look at me? A survival calculation?" I considered the question, studying him in the amber light of the desk lamp, the sharp lines of his face, the pale eyes that missed nothing, the controlled violence that hummed beneath his expensive suits. "I see someone who understands that protection and possession aren't the same thing," I said carefully. Something shifted in his expression. And Marcus didn't understand that. Marcus thought owning me and loving me were the same word. I took a sip of whiskey, letting it burn. "You've never pretended this is love?" "No." Matteo's voice went quiet. "But it is protection. The kind Julia needed and I didn't provide." We'd circled back to his sister again. We always did, eventually. The ghost that haunted every decision he made, every woman he helped, every act of controlled violence he committed in the name of keeping his people safe. "Tell me about her," I said. "Not how she died, who she was." He looked startled, like no one had asked him that before. Then he smiled, a real smile, rare and genuine. "She was stubborn, refused to learn the family business, wanted to be a teacher instead. She loved terrible romantic comedies and made the best carbonara I've ever tasted." His expression softened. "She would have liked you. Would have told me I was an idiot for keeping you in this world. Maybe she'd be right. Maybe." He refilled both our glasses. "But you're still here. So are you." Our eyes met across the desk, and I recognized something in his expression, the same thing I saw when I looked in mirrors. Two people shaped by violence, trying to build something stable in a world that rewarded brutality. "We're quite a pair," Matteo said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "We are." The call came at 2 in the morning. I was still awake in my apartment, reviewing shipping manifests on my laptop, when my phone lit up with Matteo's name. "Get to the restaurant." "Oh, no." He hung up before I could respond. I arrived 20 minutes later to find the private dining room transformed into a war council. Luca sat with his shirt torn and blood on his knuckles. Two other crew members I recognized from meetings nursed injuries, while Nico paced by the windows, his usual composure fractured. Matteo stood at the head of the table, his pale eyes cold with fury. "Sit down, Zuri." The way he said my name made my stomach drop. I sat. "The Russian deal," Matteo said, his voice dangerously soft. "The warehouse meeting that was scheduled for midnight. Someone told the Calabrese family the exact time and location. They were waiting for us with twice our numbers." Luca touched his split lip. "Only reason we got out was I smelled the setup. We bailed before they could box us in completely." 3 people knew the details of that meeting, Matteo continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "Me, Nico. And you, Zuri. You scheduled it. You sent the encrypted messages." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "You think I think someone leaked information that nearly got my people killed." His voice remained level, which somehow made it worse. "And you're the newest addition to this organization. The one with the least loyalty. The one who might still have connections to a dirty cop looking for revenge. Marcus is in Phoenix. You know that. Do I?" Matteo leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "Or did you two plan this together? You get inside my operation, feed him information, and he sells it to my enemies." The room fell silent. Nico stopped pacing. So Luca wouldn't meet my eyes. I felt something crack inside me. Not fear, but rage. Cold, calculated rage. "You're right," I said quietly. 3 people knew the details, but 4 people had access to your calendar. I pulled out my phone and opened the scheduling app. "Your calendar syncs to your phone, your laptop, and your office computer. Nico has admin access. He could see every meeting, every location, every contact." "That's absurd," Nico snapped. "I've been with Matteo for 8 years, then explained the timing." I turned to Matteo, my mind working through the patterns I'd noticed over the past weeks. "The Calabrese family has disrupted 3 of your operations in the last month. Each time, they knew exactly where to hit. But they never knew about the meetings I scheduled through encrypted channels, only the ones on your digital calendar." Matteo's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. "The shipment at the docks," I continued. "I scheduled that through Signal. No interference. But the warehouse meeting with the Russians? That was on your calendar because Nico insisted we needed it documented for the quarterly review." "She's deflecting," Nico started. "The Moretti negotiation," Matteo cut him off, his voice sharp. 2 weeks ago, Calabrese soldiers showed up at the restaurant an hour before the meeting. How did they know?" "Bad luck," Nico said, but his composure was cracking. "It was on the calendar," I said. "Marked as Moretti dinner consultation. I remember because I questioned putting real names in the calendar. And you said it was fine because only trusted people had access." Matteo stood slowly, his eyes fixed on Nico. "Show me your phone." "This is ridiculous." "Show me your phone." The silence stretched taut. Then Nico's hand moved toward his jacket. Not toward his phone, but toward the weapon I knew he carried. Luca was faster. He had Nico pinned against the wall before the gun cleared leather, his massive forearm across Nico's throat. "Don't," Luca said quietly. Matteo walked over and removed the phone from Nico's pocket himself. He scrolled through it with clinical precision, his expression growing colder with each second. "Messages with Calabrese. Dates. Times. Locations. He looked up at Nico. They promised you what? Your own territory. A cut of my business? Nico's face twisted with rage. You've gone soft, Matteo. 8 years I've been loyal, and you throw it away for some waitress you're trying to save? She's made you weak. No, Matteo said softly. She made me see clearly. You've been resentful for months, Nico. I just didn't want to believe it. He turned to me, and I saw something in his expression. Regret, perhaps, or respect. I'm sorry, he said. I should have trusted you. Yes, I replied. You should have. Nico disappeared before Matteo could decide what to do with him. Luca had him pinned one moment, and the next, Nico had twisted free and crashed through the window, disappearing into the night with blood streaming from his temple. By the time Luca reached the alley below, he was gone. Find him, Matteo ordered, his voice tight with fury. I want every contact, every safe house, every... His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Matteo. Nico's voice came through rough and strained. I have something that belongs to you. Or rather, someone who belongs to your pet project. My blood went cold. There's a warehouse at Pier 17, the old shipping facility. You know the one. Nico paused, and I heard a woman's muffled cry in the background. Come alone. Midnight. We'll negotiate terms for her safe return. Jasmine, I whispered, recognition cutting through me like glass. Touch her, and I'll... Matteo started. You'll what? You're not exactly in a position to make threats. Nico's voice hardened. Midnight. Alone. Or the Calabrese family gets to meet your little waitress friend. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your operations from someone who's seen the inside of Bellissimo. The line went dead. Matteo immediately started making calls, so summoning his crew, planning the assault. But I saw the trap clearly. Nico knew Matteo would never come alone, which meant the Calabrese soldiers would be waiting in force. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. You're not going, I said. Matteo looked up from his phone, his expression hard. She's your friend. You think I'll leave her there? I think Nico wants you dead, and Jasmine is the bait. I moved closer to the table where Luca had spread out a map of the dock area. Look at this warehouse. 3 entrances, all visible from the main floor. Nowhere to stage a crew without being seen. The moment you walk in, they'll know you didn't come alone. Then what do you suggest? Luca asked, his tone sharp with urgency. You go. Make it look real. But I go in first. Different entrance. I pointed to the map. Service tunnel from the adjacent building. I've delivered paperwork to that dock before. I know the layout. Absolutely not. Matteo's voice went cold. You're not trained for this. You'll get yourself killed. Then train me. We have 8 hours. Zuri. You gave me a choice, I interrupted, meeting his eyes. When Marcus came, when Nico betrayed us. You said I could choose where I stand. Now I'm making that choice. The office fell silent. Luca watched us both, his expression unreadable. She's right about the trap, Luca said finally. Nico knows how you operate. He'll expect the crew, expect the plan. He won't expect her. She's not a soldier, Matteo said, but his voice had lost its certainty. No, I agreed, but I know how to survive, and I'm not losing Jasmine because I was too afraid to act. I thought about Julia, about all the women who died, because someone hesitated. I won't be that person anymore. Matteo stared at me for a long moment, something complicated shifting in his expression. Then he turned to Luca. Get her a weapon. Show her how to use it. And get me the blueprints for that warehouse. The next 8 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Luca taught me to hold a gun properly, to breathe through the fear, to aim for center mass. Matteo's crew gathered in the private dining room, going over the plan with military precision. I would enter through the service tunnel 30 minutes before midnight. Matteo would arrive exactly on time, making himself visible. The crew would hold position outside, waiting for my signal. At 11:15, I stood in the alley behind the restaurant, checking the weapon Luca had given me one final time. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. Matteo appeared beside me, his expression carved from stone. "You don't have to do this." "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." He reached out and adjusted the collar of my dark jacket, his fingers lingering for a moment against my throat. "Don't die, Zuri. I've lost enough people." "Then come back alive," I replied. "So have I." I climbed into the second car, unmarked, untraceable, and drove toward the docks alone. The warehouse loomed against the night sky like a monument to decay, its broken windows reflecting moonlight. I parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, my weapon concealed beneath my jacket, my heart hammering against my ribs. The service tunnel entrance was exactly where I remembered, a rusted door behind a stack of shipping containers. I picked the lock with tools Luca had given me, my hands remembering the skills I'd learned in another life when I'd needed to break into Marcus's apartment to retrieve my documents. Inside, the tunnel smelled of mold and seawater. I moved through darkness toward the sound of voices echoing from the warehouse above. Jasmine's terrified voice, Nico's cold responses, and underneath it all, the shuffle of multiple feet. The Calabrese soldiers, waiting. I reached the maintenance ladder that led up to the warehouse floor and began to climb, the weight of the gun pressing against my spine. Matteo was walking into a trap, and I was the only one who could spring it first. I emerged from the maintenance access behind a stack of crates, just as Matteo walked through the main warehouse entrance. His hands were visible, empty, his expression carved from stone. Now Jasmine sat tied to a chair in the center of the cavernous space, her face bruised, tears streaming down her cheeks. Nico stood behind her, gun pressed to her temple. 8 Calabrese soldiers ringed the perimeter, weapons drawn. "Right on time," Nico said. "I knew you'd come. You're predictable, Matteo. That's always been your weakness." "Let her go." Matteo's voice echoed through the empty warehouse. "Your fight is with me." "My fight is with what you've become." Nico's face twisted with rage. 8 years I stood beside you. 8 years of loyalty. And you threw it away for some damaged woman who reminds you of your dead sister. I moved silently along the wall, using the shadows and crates for cover. My weapon felt heavy in my hands, Luca's voice echoing in my head. "Breathe. Aim. Don't hesitate." "Julia's death isn't Zuri's fault," Matteo said, taking a step forward. "It's mine." "No, it's yours because you never learned from it." Nico's voice rose. "The old ways are dying, Matteo. Your father would be ashamed. You've gone soft, protecting waitresses, making deals instead of taking what's ours. The Calabrese family understands what you don't. Power isn't given, it's taken. And they promised you power." Matteo's tone was flat. "Territory, your own crew. All you had to do was deliver me." "You made it easy." Nico laughed, a harsh sound. "So busy protecting your broken bird that you couldn't see the enemy inside your own house." The Calabrese soldiers were tightening their circle. I had maybe 30 seconds before they closed the trap completely. I raised my weapon, bracing it against a crate, or aimed at Nico's shoulder, the only shot I was confident I could make without hitting Jasmine. "Any last words?" Nico asked, raising his gun toward Matteo. "Yes," I said, my voice cutting through the warehouse. "Duck." Matteo dropped. I fired. The shot echoed like thunder. Nico screamed as the bullet tore through his shoulder, his gun clattering to the concrete. In the chaos, Jasmine threw herself sideways in the chair, giving Matteo the opening he needed. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Luca and the crew poured through, weapons raised, and the Calabrese soldiers scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Some fired wildly, others ran. 2 dropped their weapons immediately, hands raised. It was over in seconds. I emerged from behind the crates, my weapon still raised, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing through me. Matteo was untying Jasmine, speaking softly to her, checking her injuries. Luca and his men were securing the Calabrese soldiers who'd surrendered. And Nico lay on the concrete, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face twisted with pain and fury. Matteo finished with Jasmine and walked over to where Nico lay. He picked up the fallen gun and looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at me. He betrayed us, put all of us at risk, nearly got Luca killed. Matteo's voice was quiet. The choice is yours, Zuri. He held out the weapon. I stared at it, understanding what he was offering. Justice. Vengeance. The completion of my transformation from victim to someone who could stand in his world without flinching. I looked down at Nico, at the man who'd used Jasmine as bait, who'd sold out Matteo's crew for territory and power. Then I lowered my gun and shook my head. No, I said quietly. I'm not a killer, Matteo. That's not who I am. Something shifted in his expression, not disappointment, but something deeper. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. No, he agreed. You're not. And that's why you're stronger than him. He turned to Luca. Take Nico to the Calabrese family. Tell them this is what happens to people who betray me. They can do what they want with him. Nico's scream of protest was cut off as Luca hauled him to his feet. We drove back to Bellissimo as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Jasmine was safe in the back seat, wrapped in Luca's jacket, already calling her sister to tell her she was okay. The crew followed in 2 other vehicles, a silent caravan returning to base. The restaurant was empty when we arrived, but Matteo gathered everyone in the main dining room, Luca, his enforcers, the kitchen staff who'd stayed late, even Marco the maître d'. They stood in a semicircle, waiting. Matteo placed his hand on my shoulder, his pale eyes scanning the assembled crowd. Zuri Thompson, he said, his voice carrying through the space. Saved my life tonight. She's proven her loyalty beyond question. From this moment forward, she speaks with my authority. What she says, I say. What she decides, I support. Is that understood? A chorus of agreement. Luca nodded with approval. Even the staff who barely knew me murmured their acceptance. It was a public claim, a declaration of partnership, an acknowledgement that I'd earned my place in this world through action, not charity. Matteo's hand remained on my shoulder, steady and certain. Welcome home, Azzurri. I looked around the restaurant, at the crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the people who'd become more than colleagues. At Jasmine, bruised but safe. At Matteo, whose protective instinct had become something more complex than either of us had anticipated. I was no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer the woman who'd walked through those velvet doors months ago expecting violence and finding something far more complicated. I was exactly where I'd chosen to be. Thank you, I said quietly, meeting Matteo's eyes, for trusting me. Thank you, he replied, for being worthy of that trust. And as the morning light streamed through the windows, gilding everything in gold, I understood that freedom had never been about disappearing. It was about choosing where you stood and who you stood beside. I'd made my choice, and I'd never been more certain of anything in my life.